What did that one teacher at your school get fired for? Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the Vancher channel. Also, please share your thoughts on this video in the comments. Let's get started. Story 1. First year university philosophy. Prof planned a study group that he was going to lead before the exam. We all show up. The prof and one female student don't show. Next day in class, he jokes about having a private study session with her. Fast forward a few weeks, they get married in the school chapel. He gets fired and joins the Navy. Answer: our coach got fired for sleeping with the most popular girl in the senior class. LOL. So it's crazy that this was the top comment. She was 18 and he was only like 25. But still, it was a whole big scandal, LOL. Anyways, about 2 years later, he added me on Facebook and sent me a male body part pic right off the rip. I don't think he remembered me from school. Either way, it was disturbing, and needless to say, I blocked him immediately. Dude had literal little man syndrome. Story 2. Well, he didn't get fired for fudge a cheerleader. Not sure the administration knew. He didn't get fired for attending the football players' parties and supplying them with substances. Again, not sure the administration knew. He didn't get fired when he was busted for public urination behind a local bar. But he did get fired when they found all of our final exams, final papers, and other assignments ungraded in his desk drawer when they moved his classroom over the summer. Turns out that he never graded anything and simply gave kids the grades he thought they should have. Answer: one of my coworkers just got canned for that last thing. Turned out she was bullshitting grades for years. She had some of our top kids too, because she was the AP Bio and AP Chem instructor. You can imagine how shocked everyone was when she just didn't come back this year. The kids still defend her and think it's some hit job by the school. But the rest of us all knew something was up and felt validated, because most of her class time was spent watching movies and making presentations. The kids never presented, never raised any alarms with admin when those same kids kept bombing the actual AP test year after year, or that they were some of our lowest achievers in any science class that wasn't taught by her. Story 3. Banging the principal. The teacher's last name was Snow, so everyone was calling the principal the snowblower. Answer: vice principal got caught banging the band teacher, who was married to the English teacher. It sucked because the English teacher was such a nice guy. His wife, band teacher, and the vice principal were disliked by everyone. After the vice principal got fired, he was also found out to be stealing money from the local church where he served as a deacon. Story 4. Apparently, he had cocaine, a fifth of vodka, and a handgun in his desk at all times. Junior high is a stressful place for more than just the students, apparently. Answer: not a handgun exactly, but we had a teacher hold several 7th grade girls at gunpoint with a starter pistol. He was the track coach and had it in his desk. The guy was having a stressful phone call with his wife right after school let out for the day, and the girls were too loud in the hallway and he just lost it. Somehow he didn't get fired and came back after a leave of absence. The early 2000s were a wild time. Story 5. Had CP on his school computer. His poor daughter went to our school, and we were having a fundraiser for her because she had cystic fibrosis and needed a lung transplant. That scandal totally overshadowed the fundraiser, and she ended up transferring to another school. Story 6. Had a kid in one of my classes that had a medical condition where he could hold it if he had to urinate. He had to get to the restroom immediately. All the teachers knew. He had special permission to leave class to go whenever he needed to. One teacher made him wait, and he wet himself. Right in class, they had to block the classroom off so the custodial staff could sanitize his chair and basically the whole floor. His parents raised holy hell and didn't back down until she was fired. Good for them. Answer: I had a teacher in summer school one year who would essentially do a bathroom lottery whenever one kid asked to go to the bathroom. He would ask the class, okay, who else needs to go to the bathroom? And a few hands would always go up regardless of if they really needed to go or just wanted a break from the classroom. Then he would have us guess a number between 1 and 100, and whoever got closest to the number he was thinking of would get the pass to go. I almost shoot myself one day in his class, which was a couple of hours long, and I'll never forgive that man. Story 7. The band director caught 2 students having intimacy in a practice room. Instead of reporting it, he watched, and well, something else. Assistant band director reported that, and the band director was fired and arrested. The students were expelled. Story 8. We had an English AP teacher get fired for showing her tits to some students she played WoW with in a chat room. Story 9. Student has found out she was a former Playboy model. which was very recent. She had just graduated and became a Spanish teacher. One student told their parents, and the parents complained and made a fuss about it. Answer: I had a similar one to this. A teacher at my high school had been a stripper for a number of years to get herself through school. The strip club was not in the same city as the school, but someone found the club's website after Googling her name and the town she grew up in. They were still using her picture in promotional images on the website. School administration found out, and she was essentially forced to resign. I really liked her too. Story 10. Chemistry teacher in HS was charged with molestation of preteen girls at a campground, and he was also subsequently charged with domestic terrorism after dumping mercury at the courthouse. Edit: adding in the link to the article about it from 2008. I was mistaken. He wasn't charged with domestic terrorism. Link to article. Story 11. One of the coaches got a student pregnant. This really pissed off the girl's gym teacher he'd been fooling around with. So the school lost 2 teachers at once, and the girl disappeared quietly. Her brother was in my grade. She was younger. They all moved away. Story 12. High school algebra teacher, Mr. Robertson. He knew his shoot. He made algebra fun, and he was unconventional. The first day of class, he threw the textbook on his desk, and it slid off and hit the floor. "This is your textbook," he said, "and I'm required to give it to you. Take it home, keep it safe, bring it back undamaged. We will use it for homework. Don't bring it to class." He was the cool teacher who rode a secondhand motorcycle as his primary only vehicle. He stored his riding leathers in the classroom locker. He also put his briefcase in there, and it sat there the whole year, unopened as far as I could tell. He taught us from handouts and from what he wrote on the board. He showed us tricks to solve equations. He ran the math club and made it fun. He told us all that he was adding an extra test to our course, and it would be worth half of our grade, and allowed us to study for it in class, while he walked around giving people extra help. The test was fake. He handed out questions from Mad Magazine. He just made us study more. We were not even mad. The one problem he had was with our school dress code for teachers. He wanted to teach in slacks, nice shoes, and a nice shirt. The school wanted him in a suit and tie. He was allowed to take off the suit jacket if he wore a vest underneath. This was South Texas, and it got hot in the classrooms at times. He argued. They demanded. He pointed out that the history teacher got to teach wearing a jersey and shorts. The school countered that the history teacher was also the coach, and that was his uniform. Mr. Robertson volunteered to be an assistant coach. The school said it didn't work that way, so he showed up wearing a suit. At the end of the month, teachers were complaining that he stunk. He countered that he wasn't going to pay for all that dry cleaning. The school cracked down. So he showed up in a perfect 3-piece suit made out of denim. Blue jeans blue, with stitching that looked like Levi. Even the tie was denim. That lasted a week before the crackdown. Then he showed up in a corduroy suit. Our class asked him if these suits were not expensive. He said that Houston had lots of great secondhand stores. The corduroy suit lasted 3 days. He was a chaperone at prom. He arrived in a 3-piece suit and tie, which was completely pink. This was in 1981, so he cut quite a figure. He told us that the principal yelled at him for that. He made a habit of coming in his suit on Monday and leaving his jacket and vest in the locker. He taught in suit pants and shirt with tie. Sometimes the principal caught him and he'd pull the jacket out of the closet for a few days. He wasn't asked back at the end of his contract. Last I heard, he went to work for a chemical engineering company in their RD team for several times more than our principal made a year. And that's when I found out that while teaching us, he was a doctoral candidate working on his math dissertation. He really loved math and wanted to share it with everyone. The following year, my algebra teacher was a woman who wore floor-length dresses and wrote equations on transparencies while talking directly to the overhead projector. If we didn't do it by the book, it was a problem. Yes, we keep having to break the bad habits that Mr. Robertson gave his students, like getting the correct answer faster. Answer, not directly related to OP's post, but this comment reminded me of an instructor I had while in the military. Was training to be a crypto tech in the Air Force. Civilian instructor advised us we had 2 hours to load crypto into the device, test the voice, reset, and repeat the same process with our partner. Had to be completed within 30s, or we failed the course and would be subject to reassignment to another military career. This was 5 months into a 6-month training program. No one wanted to start over. Everyone was stressed out. We drilled over and over again for 2 hours. When the time's up, he stands and asks, "Everyone ready?" We all respond, "Yes, sir." Every pair able to perform the task in 30s? "Yes, sir." Good, then let's move on. Story 13. Starving horses of all things. Him being charged with animal cruelty made front-page news. He was fired soon after. Story 14. Home economics teacher had dementia or something of the sort and would straight up leave school in the middle of the day wouldn't tell anyone where she was going. She did this like every week, multiple times per week. We would be in the middle of class and she'd disappear, and someone would have to go and tell the office that she left. She also took a few of us on a trip to the grocery store, and OTW there, she goes, "Yeah, I ran a child over one time," and just laughs like, okay. Yeah, anyways, they fired her after she almost burned the school down because she left the stove going with food on it. Story 15. I had two teachers in high school, one male, one female, who were both in their late 30s, both married, and both pretty attractive people. Their classrooms were right next to each other, and they would openly flirt in the hall between classes. It was a running joke among the students that they were having an affair, but I don't think anyone truly believed it. It was just low-hanging fruit for teenagers. Until one night, I get a call around 3 a.m. from one of my friends who lived in this neighborhood in town that was near some railroad tracks, the same neighborhood where both of the teachers lived. Apparently, there had been a bad accident at the railroad crossing, and someone in an SUV got hit by a train, and the word was getting around that it was the two teachers. By the time school started that morning, the rumors were confirmed when both teachers didn't show up because they were both in the hospital, and we had subs in both classes. They had apparently sneaked out of their homes, and we're carrying on their actual affair somewhere out in town. Then, on the way back to their neighborhood, tried beating a train across the tracks and got smoked by it. They got caught having an affair in a very public way by getting hit by a train. The male teacher amazingly walked away from it with minor injuries. The female teacher, on the other hand, spent weeks in the hospital and almost died. I think she had to relearn how to walk-talk. She sued both the railroad company as well as the male teacher, and won, I believe. I don't even remember if they got fired, but they definitely weren't at the school for the rest of the year, or ever again after that. I just so happened to have them both as teachers at that time, so we had substitutes filling in the rest of the year. Those two classrooms were insanely awkward that day. Story 16. High school. The PE teachers also taught driver's ed. In 1 year, 3 girls ended up pregnant by 2 of the coaches. This was back in 1972. The driver's ed cars were Chevy Caprices, large back seats. Story 17. He was putting his hands up 4th grade girls' skirts in front of us in the cafeteria. It was so bold and disgusting even to our 4th grade minds. Of course he was a coach too. It's been 31 years and I still think about it. I hope he's died alone and destitute. Story 18. Punched a student out of her chair when she refused to stand for the pledge. This was 2 years after he made me demonstrate proper jumping jacks in front of the entire co-ed class because I had been using one arm to hold my large breasts in place. All the boys hooted and hollered like it was a strip show. I was fort. Story 19. High school gym teacher fraternizing with the female students outside of school. Grade 10 science teacher got in trouble for taking his lunch breaks at strip club. Not sure if he got fired. Dancers were mostly former students of his. Story 20. Having intimacy with one of the students that she was fostering and actively trying to adopt. She was a 7th grade teacher, and the kid was 13, 14. Couple years later, the 8th grade science teacher was jailed for intimacy, harmful behavior, one of the girl on the cross-country team. He was the coach. Allegedly, he fingered her in the classroom. Another teacher married his senior student. He was a young teacher in his early 20s, and I don't think they started dating until she was well into her college career, but no clue. He still works at the school. Another teacher resigned due to speculation that he was sleeping with a senior student. Turns out the student was infatuated with him and was posting a bunch of fake stories online. Teacher had a wife and young kids at the time. They are still together and seem to be doing good. Answer, another teacher married his senior student. He was a young teacher in his early 20s, and I don't think they started dating until she was well into her college career. But no clue. He still works at the school. That's really not that unheard of. Not that it makes it any less weird, but I'm a high school teacher, and I can think of 3 instances of this in my community off the top of my head, and one of them is still teaching at the school where he met his wife. In all of them, there was only a 4-ish year age gap, and they all started dating after the student graduated, as far as we know. Story 21. He was 24 and the tennis coach started sleeping with a 19-year-old student. She wasn't one of his students. They had met at a bar over the summer. She used a fake ID. Since she was a student, he was fired. They got married about 2 years later, have a couple of kids, just celebrated 25 years together. Story 22. The nurse got caught drinking wine out of her water bottle during school hours. Apparently had been going on for maybe years. She died a couple years later from liver failure. Story 23. Slapped a kid in the face, 5th grade. Granted, she was old school when I had her in the early 80s, and she was ancient then. She slapped our hands with a ruler and made us pray before lunch. Public, non-religious school. But that was also during a time when principals gave us paddlings too. She loved me. so I got by. A few years after I left her class, she finally snapped and got called on it. Story 24. Ry Windsor was our German and geography teacher at Northeast Intermediate in Midland, Michigan. He was German himself and a war orphan, woo-woo too. He was an amazing teacher, and he even had his own learning system for German. Also, he didn't just teach us German and geography. There would be days where we'd come in and on his chalkboard, which he invented, it was divided into 8 or 12 rows of chalkboard, which could be rotated so that you had, in essence, 4 chalkboards. It was great for group tests and learning in general, with stuff related to philosophy, criticism, critical thinking versus obedience, and so on. Remember, this guy had seen firsthand the deaths of his parents to bombs, the aftermath of war, and then he emigrated to the U.S. and joined the Army and rose to the rank of colonel after 3 decades of service, first active duty and then the reserves. Retiring at 56, the dude even had a Meritorious Service Medal of Honor for his contributions to the Army Reserve. They say he retired from teaching in 1986, but people in the know learned that he was basically forced out, threatened with firing. They didn't like that he wasn't teaching by the book. It's possible some parents didn't like that he was handing out pamphlets on important and critical philosophical subjects when he was supposed to be teaching us German and geography. This was the Reagan era, mind you. While his pamphlets covered things like the sacrifices the early founders of the USA made, like losing farms and businesses to confiscation or burning, losing loved ones, etc., and thus at first glance sounded very patriotic, all of his lessons ultimately were about questioning authority and using critical thinking skills to demand answers to BS. And parents tend to just assume that this is subversive. And hell yeah, it was in a good way. The truth is, if you ask most students who had him for German and/or geography, like me, they will tell you he was probably one of the best teachers, if not the best teacher, they ever had. We're talking Dead Poet Society, level teacher. We're talking Socrates, and we know what they did to both those guys. R.I.P. Raymond Windsor. They did you wrong. Answer. That's how veterans need to be instead of allowing MAGA. I'm a veteran myself and so disappointed with the guys I served with, and even Dakota Meyer. Recently, Dakota Meyer was calling out a fellow veteran for reminding service members to disobey unlawful orders. If you know Meyer's story, it's about him disobeying orders to save his men during a firefight. Story 25. I had a German teacher that nobody liked. He was a hard jerk with no chill. For example, he would make us take practice quizzes for homework and grade them for accuracy. However, I realized that if you just did what he said on the assignments, you were probably going to walk away with a B. If you cheated to get a better grade on the practice quizzes, then you didn't learn the stuff and you wouldn't get a good grade. He was a hard jerk, but he wasn't that bad. He was forced to resign when he jokingly threw a piece of chalk at a student and she complained to the administration. The problem with being the teacher nobody likes is that you can't joke around with anyone. I received this info from the teacher himself. As an aside, this teacher took a trip to Italy every year and offered the trip to any school staff or any of the students. I went when I was in 11th grade. It was an amazing trip. It was him, me, a senior, and 3 other teachers. We were up by 6 a.m. and sightseeing until midnight. We only ate at good, non-touristy restaurants. It was my teacher's 40-something time going, and he was fluent in Italian. We spent 2 weeks traveling all over the country on a bus. Definitely a trip of a lifetime. It wasn't school-sponsored, so we all drank at dinner. Usually the teacher would have 2 wine spritzers and almost pass out. The other student and I would make sure he got to his hotel room, and then we'd go out into the city all night. Answer. My physics teacher was a hard jerk, always writing us, and had very high expectations for a high school physics class. He wrote the curriculum for us and our local university, so we just attributed all of this to him just being too much of a nerd and not enough of people person. It wasn't until much later I realized he was probably one of the best teachers I've ever had. He was just phenomenal, but you just don't appreciate things when you are a kid. Story 26. Having an affair with an 8th grader, leaving his wife and marrying her, impregnating her, going to prison for it. Story 27. Worst teacher I ever had. Knew nothing about the material, allowed open cheating during exams, negligent in supervising labs, chemistry, to the point it might be criminal. A classmate got a mild acid burn on his face and filled the classroom with fumes, and she didn't even react until half the class was already out the door. They told us she was going on medical leave, and then we never heard about her again. Story 28. She dared to mark points down from the rich kid when he threw a tantrum and started arguing with someone, i.e. did her job. Kid's mom threatened to sue the school, and the school fired the teacher to get the kid's mom to shut up. Answer: reading stuff like this really does put me in a bad mood. This is just horrible, but it's crazy that this type of stuff is still going on. It was like this in my school too. Most of the jock cheerleaders had important parents, so they had a free pass to basically be jackasses and even bully other students. The teachers would just basically look away. My school even had this bullshit zero tolerance policy where you would get disciplined for getting beat up and not swinging a single punch. But when the good old boys got caught fighting or pushing other students around, the most punishment was the principal making them shake hands, and it was brushed under the rug. Thing is, this type of stuff doesn't change even outside of school. You see this a lot in small township county jobs in the U.S. where nepotism is normalized. People getting managed out to bring in the police chief's nephews or local politicians' son-in-laws. It's disgusting. Story 29. Raping his football team. He'd get them drugged up and diddle them. He used pics of them in the act as blackmail. A couple kids reportedly eliminate themselves over the whole situation. This apparently went on for over a decade before anyone said anything, and the rest came out. He only went away for a handful of years and is already out living life again. Story 30. She brought her boyfriend to school just so they could screw each other's brains out in the janitor's closet. Story 31. Ms. Finley, 1983-ish, 8th grade American history. She goes off on a tangent about Cain and Abel, how Cain betrayed Abel, and that God marked Cain and all his descendants. And that's where black people come from. Even in that era and at that age, we all knew that was not a good thing to say. There were 2 to 3 black kids in the class, but everything carried on. The next day, the principal comes and asks her to go with him, and an assistant principal takes over the class. Never saw Ms. Finley again. Answer: the one time I saw an AP teaching a class was last year. It caught me off guard because if we're short on subs, they'll ask other teachers to cover rather than admin. Found out later that the actual teacher had had a breakdown and unloaded on his class about his drinking and dip, his heart-wrenching breakup, and his neglectful parent. I was aghast that students were talking about it compassionately but also out in the open. I rashly told them to keep his business his so they would know I wasn't playing. I'm less convincing to the gossips on payroll, though. Story 32. There was a girl who would walk into his room every day and try to talk to him. She wasn't in his class, so he was weirded out by it. He would regularly play music during class while we studied or worked on projects. He made a playlist full of stalker songs. Think Somebody's Watching Me by Rockwell. He would change the song to something from that playlist whenever she showed up. It was all in good fun for the class, but when the girl found out about it, she said he was harassing her, and he was fired without any further investigation. He got his job back a couple years later, thankfully. Everyone loved him. He was awesome. Story 33. I worked at a middle school that fired a special educator because she was forging teacher signatures on forms to remove kids from her caseload. She was escorted out by police and the principal was removed because he was notified by one of the teachers and did nothing about it. Story 34. I felt bad for my one. He was genuinely the sweetest guy and we all loved him. He was never inappropriate, but he could build rapport with us like no one else. My mate found out that his house had been robbed. This teacher knew we smoked cigarettes and knew he needed to calm down. He said to me, "Take him for a cig and come back in 5. Another teacher overheard him, and he got suspended at first and eventually fired. Should he have been letting us smoke? No. Was this a genuine human being who could see a 16-year-old in distress and knew he needed to go and do something he was going to do anyway to calm down? Yes, I stand by Mr. Phillips." Story 35. Back in the days of AEM, he was asking female students for their screen names and talking to them online. Story 36. This 70-ish-year-old teacher with cancer didn't try to break up a physical fight and was fired the same week. It was my freshman year of high school, I think. Story 37. I suppose my English teacher was actually fired, but what we saw was several men leading him out of the class one day. Found out later that he had suffered a mental breakdown and was being transported to the city asylum. Never found out what happened to him after that. Story 38. His intimacy tape with another teacher somehow got played instead of the video for the lesson. Not in full, obviously. Story 39. Second job doing gay adult content was sort of an open secret that a lot of students knew about, and then one day admin found out and he was gone. Answer: yeah, we had one at my high school that had been a stripper for a number of years to get herself through school. The strip club was not in the same city as the school, but someone found the club's website after Googling her name and the town she grew up in. They were still using her picture in promotional images on the website. School administration found out and she was essentially forced to resign. I really liked her too. Story 40. Made bongs in the art room and sold them to students. Got caught because she left one in the annealer overnight and the principal went into the art room early and got curious why the annealer was on when they weren't doing glass and art at that time. Story 41. I used to be spoiled to hell and back by my old 7th grade music teacher. He would ace me on everything, even if I did a piss-poor job at my assignments. I had plenty of those. I moved after being at that school for only a year. After I graduated, I saw a news article appear online that he was arrested for diddling with one of his students. I guess 12-year-old me dodged a bullet? Story 42. It boiled down to Parkinson's. He had Parkinson's and was trying to coast to retirement. Didn't teach anything in the 2 classes I had him for. After many parent complaints, he was offered early retirement or he'd be fired. He eliminated himself on campus for all us kids to find on yearbook pic, up day the last day of school. Story 43. In 8th grade, my English teacher also had to teach us some bullshit life skills class. He decided, and as high schoolers we happily obliged, to blow it off and show us Top Gear reruns during those classes instead. When it came to assignments, he just copied our marks from English class and adjusted them by a couple of percent to make it look legit. Easiest class ever until the headmaster walked into his classroom one day and caught him red-handed. He was gone the next day already. Answer: I had an English teacher like this. To be fair, I think she really did try. She honestly was a pretty shoot teacher. Her lessons mostly consisted of watching movie adaptations of the books we were supposed to be covering, her telling anecdotes and drawing shoot on the whiteboard, us grading each other's stories, etc. This was at an international school overseas where her husband also taught and her kids attended. The school administrators were generous and didn't want to embarrass her, so they made her a librarian, which was convenient, as the previous librarian was suspended and on his way out for allegedly trying to touch a young female student's breasts. I thought she did a pretty good job as librarian. Story 44. My history teacher got fired for trying to reenact the Battle of Waterloo with the entire class as soldiers. He used a fire extinguisher for cannon smoke. The principal walked in during the French cavalry charge. Story 45. Somehow his wife won $100K plus in the lottery. They didn't tell anybody, which was weird. Teacher was part of a pool that bought tickets weekly. The rest of the pool found out and hired an attorney. Big mess. Story 46. This was around mid-2000s in middle school. She kept all the girls after class one day. I always walked to class with one of the girls, so I waited around, and when she got out, she told me what happened. The teacher basically unbuttoned her shirt and flashed them all in her bra. She then asked them if they would be uncomfortable with her teaching like that, and that they should be mindful of how they dress and show their chests, because it can be distracting and inappropriate. She was in her 60s, and they kind of just let her soft retire because the principal was her husband. My friend did say she was pretty stacked, though. Story 47. When I was at the playground with my child, a kindergarten group came in. 2 teachers, both on their phones. One child fell off the swing and started crying. One teacher barely looked up and said, "Oh, you'll be fine." Then another girl came to the teacher and said she really had to go to the bathroom. The teacher replied, "You can hold it." The girl started crying, saying she couldn't. The teacher insisted, "You have to." The girl kept crying and ended up peeing and pooping her pants. I took my kids' spare clothes, they were way too small, but better than nothing, and some wet wipes and helped her change. Then I asked which kindergarten they were from. It was a public playground in a park, and I called the headmaster to file a complaint. I hope those teachers were fired. I'm not a wild helicopter parent. Kids should learn, and they should fall sometimes. But human dignity matters at any age. Story 48. Swung back at a student trying to punch him. It was his dream job, and he never recovered. Took his own life a couple years later. Answer: I did a professional development course which was basically how to protect yourself from violent patients and students and restrain them without punching them in the face or anything else that would technically be assault and unreasonable force when they accuse you later. And as one of the few people in that class with extensive actual martial arts and defense training, it felt extremely meh. Story 49. Don't know if she was fired or just stopped turning up. She had been getting increasingly weird with us, like ranting about teenagers having unprotected intimacy and stuff. Then she didn't turn up for a couple of weeks and no one seemed to know what had happened. We then saw an article in a local newspaper saying she was found passed out on a park bench with a bottle of adult beverage. Her 3-year-old was sitting on the floor by the bench. Never saw or heard anything about her again. Story 50. My Chem 101 professor, my first semester at university, was an alcoholic and taught a 7 a.m. class. He came into class every morning either hungover or still tipsy from the previous night. Regularly put the chalk down and would regale us with stories of last night's adventures at the gay bar where he accidentally cupped a guy's balls while playing pool. I got an A but went on to Chem 201 and realized he didn't teach me anything, and I was completely unprepared. He so horribly botched the foundation of my chemistry education that I changed majors to a STEM field without chem. Story 51. 1974-ish. Favorite teacher. Height of the Cold War. He was fired for being a communist. He wasn't a communist. He was someone who refused to adhere to right-wing propaganda and made us think for ourselves. Story 52. I never could prove it, but allegedly, my junior high art teacher was allegedly fired for intimacy misbehavior. Story 53. Principal at my HS got caught sleeping with a few players from the football team. She ended up serving 1 year in prison for statutory violation. It was a pretty big deal in our town. Funny story, actually. I was checking into a hotel a few years ago, and she was the front desk attendant. We acted like we didn't know each other. Story 54. 6th grade math teacher was a closet alcoholic. He got caught drinking a Miller Lite while on lunch at his desk. The thing is, he reeked like a beer brewery but could not smell it on himself. We did. Story 55. Teacher at my school that got canned for an inappropriate relationship. He started dating a former student of the school when she was in her late 20s, and she had graduated before he was even a teacher. She just happened to be an alumni. They were similar ages. Nothing shady, but the school felt it was inappropriate. Story 56. Had a relationship with a student. Wasn't illegal since the student was 18, but still creepy as hell, and he was fired as soon as it came out. Story 57. Drinking on the job and giving his pets special reading material, then would base the tests on materials he selectively shared. I was failing until a classmate shared a sheet. Passed that test, he tried to say I cheated. Then came state exams at end of year, aced the exam. Story 58. The story I heard was that he got caught smoking with other students outside. I don't remember if it was after school or while on the clock. The dude was cool though. I was in a typing class that he taught. Answer. My advanced English, great books teacher, was known to leave a pack of smokes in his center console of his unlocked car parked in an obscure area of the lot. A few of his more prolific students knew and treated the kindness with due respect. When the pack was low, we would refresh it. His class was awesome and he taught well. I believe he is still producing great writers and enthusiastic readers to this day. I hope so. He was a truly kind, intelligent, and respectful teacher. Story 59. There was one teacher at my middle school who would take away students' phones if they were using it in class. He would put it in his pocket and wouldn't give it back unless you reached in and took it. I don't know if anything more suspicious than that ever happened, or if that was enough to be considered worthy of police investigation. But darn, that guy was universally disliked. Everyone was happy when he was fired. Story 60. Bank robbery. She was a suspected getaway driver in a heist that occurred 5 years prior but had no record. I guess the DA offered her a deal and she pled guilty. Went to jail mid-year. I do have to say that she was one of the most fun, imaginative, and inspiring teachers we ever had for 7th grade English. The kids loved her and worked hard for her, and the parents were sad to see her go. Story 61. We had a popular film class in middle school, super competitive to get into. I fit the criteria and had film experience, but didn't get in. They went on out-of-state trips and filmed all sorts of awesome things. I was so disappointed at the time. I noticed that only certain types of students were in the class. A year later, he's fired and arrested. It turns out, in addition to the stuff shown to the school, he was filming extracurriculars with the students, both boys and girls. I was very glad I wasn't in that class after that. Story 62. Never got fired, but was found in his 70s, abandoned alone, in a dementia shoot-the-bed nursing home. Mr. McDonald was a teacher in a NY public school who always had a select group called Mac Boys that added new boys as the older boys graduated. They all came from homes with an absent dad, divorced, dad died, foster care. Back then, everyone thought he was a wonderful man. He took the boys on summer vacations and weekend trips to beach, amusement park, camping, museums, and so on. Years later, as adults, some of the boys reconnected and talked about what happened to them. No one pressed charges, but 2 of them wanted to know where he was and if he was around kids. They found him across the country in Arizona in a nursing home. They told the nurses he was a pedo. Story 63. Violating COVID policy by refusing to wear a mask and get tested. Technically, he was only suspended, but he died of COVID before his suspension ended. This was years after I graduated, and I learned about it through a former teacher of mine that's still a family friend. She almost got fired for refusing to attend his funeral. Story 64. Molesting students in the 80s and then more in the 2000s. Someone finally came forward and the rest was history. Story 65. Barred a girl then, his own parents threatened to eliminate girl if she came forward. All 3 were arrested and it was a huge scandal as he was 2nd grade teacher in Catholic school. High school coach invited girls over to practice one-on-one at his apartment. Gave me his private number. Asked if I'd help redecorate his office as he had new couch and wanted me to tell him was it comfy enough? I never went, M gave the phone number to my parents immediately, so no harm to me, thank God. Story 66. Turning off the lights to watch a movie. Ask the one black kid in his class to smile so they can see them. Story 67. Openly expressed transphobic and anti-Semitic views in one school, got fired and sent to my school. Catcalled a student, got fired again. Gym teacher. Story 68. My grade 7 English teacher took a trip during summer vacation with a grade 12 student to BC, where they got caught robbing a bank. Needless to say, neither one came back. Bonus round. When the police searched the student's room, they found a headstone that he stole from a cemetery. Not sure how his mom missed that one. Story 69. Long time ago, 1976-ish, our physics teacher, Mr. Jones, was known to have a short fuse, but was a great teacher, until he asked the class if we thought we'd pass our O-levels, so we were 15-ish. My mate, who was actually a science brain box, was the only one who put his hand up. For reasons no one understood, the teacher thought he was being a smart jerk, walked over and pulled him by the hair to the front of the class and started to pound his head against the wall. He suddenly stopped and said sorry and walked out. The plasterboard wall had broken with the force. My mate was shaking like a leaf. 1 hour later, parents turned up at the headmaster's door, and Mr. Jones was never seen again. Genuinely frightening at the time. My mate got over it and became a minor celebrity at school, if that's the right word. Story 70. In the 50s, in my elementary school class, we had a teacher who was so violent that none of us would even ask to go to the bathroom because, depending on her mood, she might slap us across the face. So we had this boy who was slow and had a hard time learning to read and write. Because I had polio, I stayed in the classroom during recess and our lunch recess. So she had him stay in with me, and I worked with him. One day, she looked at his writing, and she just started slapping him over and over. One of the other kids started crying, and that meanie just kept on slapping little Joey. Finally, one of the kids ran out and got another teacher to help, and she came in and almost tackled the teacher. Then the principal came, and even then the teacher kept trying to hit Joey. They sent the teacher home, and the rest of the day, the principal was our teacher. The next day, we got a new teacher, and Joey got sent to a different school. Story 71. A male science teacher at our middle school, who was also a football coach, went after a kid that was a class clown and was the size of a fourth grader. The kid had been pushing his buttons all year, and one day between classes we heard yelling and the sound of desks being knocked over. The kid ran from the room to the room across the hall and hid behind the teacher there, begging her for help. The science teacher followed him into her room. His face was red and his neck veins were bulging. She stayed between the two and talked the other teacher down. Without her there, I think he would have eliminated that kid. He was told to turn in his resignation the next day. Story 72. I had a history teacher who told all the students in the senior class that Obama was going to tax 5 cents for every text message. Some of us, including myself, were old enough to vote. I called him out on it, asking for the source, and he told me the Washington Post. So that night, I scoured the 2008 internet to find any report on it whatsoever. And of course, it did not exist. The next day, I came back to class and told him I looked into the Washington Post and didn't find anything. He then tried to explain that I misunderstood him, and he said the New York Post. Figuring he would do this, I told him I already checked there and every other major news source as well, and politely suggested that he may have been using his position to manipulate students into voting a certain way, and he kicked me out of class. Almost immediately afterward, he was fired, and everyone thought it had something to do with me reporting him or something, which I didn't do. It turns out he had been stealing school computer equipment to use in his weird sect of a Baptist church. He was prime MAGA before MAGA existed. Story 73. My grandpa taught shop, local punk kid, 18-year senior, kept escalating insults for months, went a step too far, and insulted my grandma to my grandpa's face. Unfortunately for, and unbeknownst to said punk kid, Grandpa was at one time the Pacific Fleet boxing champ during WW2. Punk kid lost all his front teeth and had his jaw wired for a bit. Grandpa got fired, even in the 50s, but regretted nothing. He is also legendary for having broken his hand punching a bull between the eyes and knocking it out. His brothers all swore it was true when I was a kid. They may have been messing with us, though, as they were all quite fond of tall tales. I believe the one about the punk kid, though. Grandma showed us the newspaper clipping about it. Lol. Apparently, the kid was only not prosecuted for public obscenity because he was considered to be adequately punished for the crime by my grandpa, so whatever he said was pretty foul for the time. Grandpa was fired, but not prosecuted, and charges weren't pressed. Story 74. Calling his 16-year-old student a slut in front of the whole class. She was also one of very few black students at my high school. Story 75. had a 66, 280 birth coach who had an affair with a 50, 100 cheerleader, which began the summer before our senior year. Code him, his job, marriage, kids, and about $6,000 on the new toys he bought her after graduation. Strange times were the early 90s. Story 76. Didn't do his job. The class was very confusing. We'd have pop quizzes on topics we never studied even once. Story 77. High school principal. He was fired after it was discovered he had constructed a plot to eliminate the superintendent. He was discovered with a shotgun in his vehicle, and rumor has it he had procured cyanide, though I'm not sure if that was true or not. Story 78. He came into the high school chemistry class and wrote preemptive retribution on the board, pushed 2 heavy tables against the doors to prevent anyone from getting in or getting out, and then screamed at the kids for the next 45 minutes for being lazy and not submitting their homework. This was before cell phones were a thing. He retired a few days later. Story 79. Punched a student. To be honest, the teacher that did it was a real pushover. The kid, of course, deserved it, and it made me respect the teacher way more. But yeah, he was gone after that incident. Story 80. Accusing a substitute for being a terrorist and screaming to the sky that the planes were going to eliminate us. This wasn't even 911 or any time close to it. It was 2 years ago. Story 81. He was the weightlifting coach. When one of the female team members won first place in a big deal competition, IDK, if it was like regional or state, not much of a weightlifting enthusiast, he kissed her on the mouth in congratulation. I keep telling myself he was just caught up in the moment because the alternative is so gross. But yeah, that was an immediate firing. Story 82. Wasn't fired, but was encouraged to resign or be fired. Some of the wrestling team got charged with disorderly conduct for intimacy, harassing new teammate. While the administration did exactly what they should have and reported it to the authorities, the coach had decided to shrug off the complaints and just told the new guys to deal with it. Story 83. One of our principals was an alcoholic. English teacher saw him after classes leaving his office with wet pants and wobbling down the stairs, leaning on the wall. Then he was fired and later was hired as government official, suburb administration, or STH like that. One history teacher was skinny, yelling, and hell of a angry. She was threatening misbehaving kids with her ex-convict brother. We wrote a petition to remove her, and she was removed from teaching in our class, and later she was fired. Another principal was told to leave on her own, or State Security Service, Kazakhstan, will take her from the celebration of the 1st of September in handcuffs in front of all the school. She was investigated for embezzlement. Gee, these were crazy 2000s. Story 84. For being racist. A professor in college didn't pass a kid causing him not to graduate. The kid was pissed and didn't want to have to retake just one class to graduate, so he decided to pull the race card, get the teacher fired, and get his diploma. The kid is Hispanic and said the teacher was racist against Hispanics, except that half the graduating class was Hispanic. The school didn't want to deal with it and just gave the kid what he wanted. The teacher was kind of a male body part, but he didn't deserve that. Story 85. She admitted to our class that she purposely swerved to run over cats on many of our neighborhood streets. Fudge you, Mrs. Salazar. I hope you rot in some kind of kitty cat hell. Story 86. Student has catfished him on Facebook, and he sent private pictures. They showed them around, destroyed his life. Small city, everyone knew. Story 87. 2 come to mind. One was a HS history teacher who randomly nailed a big swing line stapler at a kid, hitting him hard in the shoulder. We were stunned, watched while the teacher packed his personal items and left without a word. No clue why. The other was the civics teacher, married to a coach, who had an affair with the assistant principal. Story 88. Playing Eliminate, Fudge, Mary on their lunch break at the local bar. They said a lot of students' names. It was filmed and 3 teachers were let go. Story 89. It was a teacher at a school where I worked. He went berserk and attacked a secretary, beating her and giving her a neck injury. He punched a security guard who intervened, then smashed his hand through a window. He ran off to his on-campus apartment. He was told he had 3 days to leave the country. At the end of the 3 days, staff entered his apartment and found there was whitish film that seemed to be dried semen all over the furniture. They took it to a field near the school and burned it. Good times. Story 90. Hitting on intimacy, harassing a student in my class in high school, who happened to be the daughter of one of the most prominent radio and TV personalities in town. Oops. Story 91. Husband was in band during high school and had an amazing instructor. Popular, fun, and one of his most memorable. Unfortunately, the instructor's wife got discovered having an affair, and he pretty much lost his shoot and eliminate her and her lover. Totally rocked the community and my husband's mind, and he's still serving a life sentence without parole. Pretty sad, and my husband still speaks fondly of those years in band. Story 92. After attending, but found out he was arrested for stealing his neighbor's mail and applying for credit cards in their name for him to use. Not sure which government agency ended up busting him, but funny that he was the U.S. government teacher. Story 93. For making incredibly inappropriate comment statements regularly. I had to be interviewed by criminal investigators because I had commented to another teacher that he was weird and made me uncomfortable. One time in class, he was talking about the roles of women in the home, and he told me I would be barefoot, pregnant, and in the kitchen. That was just one example of the out-of-pocket shoot, he would say. Same school, the guidance counselor got fired for having intimacy with a student and also for having 2 other male students in her home and for giving them adult beverage. It was wild. Story 94. In high school, an English teacher sent private pictures to a former student whose little brother went to our school. Big brother shared them with little brother, and little brother shared them with the school. I would say 50-70 of the school saw her private pictures. Because she technically didn't do anything wrong, the dubiousness of sexting former students aside, she quit for a few years, and then I think she ended up coming back because she was a popular good teacher before that. There was also a history teacher, sports coach, embezzling funds from his sport and getting kids addicted to chewing tobacco, and he was fired for good. Story 95. Librarian was embezzling school funds earmarked for development of our new library to buy furniture and other stuff for her house. I attended a fundamentalist Christian high school. 2 female married teachers got caught making out one morning before school by the school secretary. They forgot to unlock the door to let students in, and IDK lost track of time or something. Story 96. Not a teacher, bus driver, got fired for taking a water bottle from a kid who was showering other kids. When the driver took it, the poor baby got splashed and completely lost his chute. Parents threatened to sue for assault, board folded instantly, driver was fired for unintentionally doing what the kid was intentionally doing to other kids. Story 97. At my school, there were 2 male teachers a few years apart who were fired for being child predators. One was hitting on a middle school girl, and the other was doing nefarious things with young male students. Very gross to think about now that I'm an adult. Story 98. 2 teachers were fired during my high school years. One was a history teacher. He was a really good teacher. He had been a college wrestler and competed in an Olympics. Years later, while teaching us, a student, male football lineman, kept fudge with him, slamming his shoulder into him really hard when walking by him, insulting him in class and shoot like that. One day as a class was letting how the student two-handed shoved him back into a wall, the teacher went in for a wrestling takedown and put the kid through a desk very seriously injured. Never saw the teacher again, but I know they didn't file any charges against him. The student didn't return either. Some rumors said he couldn't use the stairs due to his injuries, old buildings with no elevators ramps at that time, while others said he transferred out of the district. Second was an English teacher. She was a really good teacher as well, but she was caught in an inappropriate relationship with a female student. We are a statutory violation at a minimum. The odd one that never got fired was an old male English teacher who'd spend his time after school in the boys' locker room, watching the kids shower after sports practices. He always had an excuse for being there, but most of the students just gave up and went home in their sweaty, dirty gear. Story 99. Had a professor at community college get fired for saying something super racist. It was a writing class, and we all had to select a poem to read aloud. I wasn't paying attention to anyone's poem, just sitting there quietly. This African-American woman reads her poem, and we all politely clap a little. The professor stands up and says, "That sound like an in-word gospel." Caught me way off guard. I wasn't even sure I heard what I thought I heard. It was extremely out of character for that guy too, or I would have thought. He was an old hippie-looking guy. Story 100. Trying to groom female students in grade 78, one accepted an invite to his house. Their body language was so weird and made me uncomfortable to watch. She knew far more about intimacy than an average 7th grader. Poor girl. Story 101. Junior college professor for Bio 101 didn't know biology. We signed a petition. He couldn't explain the Krebs cycle, let alone a cell membrane. Story 102. 4th grade teacher got fired for keeping adult beverage in a closet in the classroom and drinking. It was sad because she was a really kind old lady who just happened to have a drinking problem due to a rough life. She got fired when I was in high school. Story 103. I'm not sure if he got fired or left before he would have been fired, but my HS English teacher, years after I graduated, left his wife for a former student. I'm pretty sure that she was a very recent former student too, like 19 to 21 years old. He was a very good-looking man and the brother of a famous Hollywood actor. You would know this brother. He's been in tons of stuff. Pretty scandalous when it happened. Story 104. Primary school teacher was both cruel and violent. Parents didn't believe us. I was in high school when she was caught. Story 105. High school teacher was watching adult content while his laptop was connected to the projector. The whole class saw it. Story 106. The superintendent of a school district in my state was caught pooping on the track of the high school in the town where he lived, which is neighboring to me, made all the news feeds, and he will go down infamy as the pooperintendent. He also got the rest of his $100K salary because he was placed on leave until the end of the year. In case you missed it above, pooperintendent. Story 107. Students did poorly on a pre-calc exam. In response, the teacher threatened to drill a hole in their heads and skull fudge them. Fired immediately, but still showed up to the graduation ceremony that year to gloat to the students who reported him that he has a better paying job after they got him fired. Puzal. Story 108. Junior high science teacher was also track coach. Took the kids to the state meet, stayed in a hotel, and bought them booze in adult content magazines. Story 109. Gym teacher, he was the mayor's brother. The middle gym class was at the high school pool. He let the kids in his class get to rough, and he wasn't paying attention. Kid almost drowned. Story 110. Stealing from the school. Coffee, tableware, silverware, toilet paper. You name it. Mrs. Wen, you go girl. Story 111. A girl from my grade found him online and was harassing him, and he said to stop, but just having messaged her back online was enough for them to fire him. She even fully admitted he did nothing wrong. She was even talking to him in an intimacy nature. It was just craziness. Story 112. After months of complaining that our science teacher coach was making us uncomfortable and had touched a female student inappropriately while demonstrating where a muscle was, he finally got enough complaints from parents when he told a student she'd have to room with him during a softball trip. Last I heard, he choked a kid out during a baseball game at his next job. Story 113. He was a pedophile working with special needs in our high school and was caught 2 years about after I had graduated. I was in his class and knew something was off when this nonverbal autistic older teen would freak out every time he came around and wanted to go for a walk with him. He was caught in a shed on the track field, and it was all over our local news. Story 114. Having fentanyl on her while her boyfriend was sitting in the car in the parking lot smoking fentanyl with her 2-year-old baby. 17 charges of child endangerment. Story 115. Former principal. I've fired 5 teachers and moved on several more. 4 were simply shoot teachers who had no control, made no improvement after intensive support, and eventually enough was enough. 1 was fired because she was a narcissistic bully with victim complex. The rest were moved on because they were either not good enough or were having a negative effect on team morale, were not nice people, or didn't like children. Other non-teaching staff have been fired for alcoholism, theft, attendance issues, online behavior, and general twattery. I was principal for over 20 years. Story 116. For physically beating the crap out of me because I didn't do math homework in 2nd grade. It was in my home country, and my maternal grandfather went to school when I was at home, after school and crying. I legit don't know if she was fired or not, but I never saw her the next day. Story 117. We had a football coach get fired for punching a parent at a football practice for slapping his son in the face. The parent actually deserved it, so all the students rallied for him, but to no avail. Story 118. HS teacher, Olympic wrestling, hopeful who girls kept throwing themselves at. He done goofed eventually. Story 119. I found out one of my old high school teachers, 4 years stayer. I graduated, got busted for being a pedo, and got life. Story 120. 2 of them from high school, 1 for selling pot, 2 students. The other was in charge of senior trips. It was always someplace in the Caribbean or Mexico. He was sleeping with students before, during, and after the trip. Story 121. One of my teachers got fired and after throwing a chalkboard eraser at a kid sitting at the back of our class because he was talking to the kid next to him. The chalkboard eraser hit him in the face, broke his glasses, and cut his head open. We never saw the teacher again. Story 122. I went to an American international school in South America when I was a kid. My dad's work took us down there when I was young. There was a substitute teacher that we had every so often, Mr. Chapman. Because of being part of a smallish community of expats, there wasn't a huge pool of substitutes for the school to choose from. so he was around pretty often. Maybe every few weeks we'd see him around campus. Always nice. No one noticed anything strange or off about him. This was maybe 7th grade or thereabouts. There was an English language newspaper in the city we lived in, and one day there's an article with a photograph of a man in handcuffs. Mr. Chapman in handcuffs. He was arrested by Interpol and extradited back to, I want to say, Canada. He was a fugitive who had fled child harmful behavior charges. I imagine that counts as getting fired. Story 123. Getting hands-on and creepy with the girls. At first, it was one girl who complained and they demanded documentation as proof, so she kept a notebook. Other girls found out about the notebook and started contributing incidents with him to her. He was fired by the end of the semester. Story 124. High school band teacher girls volleyball coach called in sick for 3 days. Was seen on a game show during the time he was sick and they fired him for it. I don't remember the game show he was on. Fast forward a few months and he was arrested at the airport returning from a trip. He was arrested for having intimacy with girls on the volleyball team he coached. Story 125. Didn't get fired, but got demoted for using his position as IT for the district to harass his ex-wife to agree to the divorce agreement. Was also known to ask girls to bend over to look down shirts or up skirts. It was my father, LOL. Also, a teacher in middle school went to a party, and I guess she was caught drinking? Some people say she was banging a student. Story 126. After I graduated, my choir teacher got fired for banging a student. Came to find out from a friend that it was a regular thing for him to allow students to bang each other in the practice rooms. Story 127. As a longtime higher ed teacher, I have had 3 coworkers fired for various malfeasance. All adults, so no child pred stuff, just pred. One had a harem of students' girlfriends more than I could count. He was having students grade his papers and enter the grades, etc. One of the ladies got mad at him and went to the dean to explain what was going on. He was gone the next day. Last I heard, he had opened a Roto-Rooter type business. One was turning in performance documents for worksite learning, on-the-job training for students, and never visited the student's place of work. He was gone the next day. I ran into him working at a bike shop, awkward, a few years later. The last was a math teacher who was having a thing with a much younger female student with a 20-year age difference. Evidently, she had a seizure of some kind in the parking lot. When the paramedics showed up, they asked her who they should contact, and she said, Mr. Math Teacher. They went and got him out of class and took him to the parking lot. He blew his top and was yelling at her that she shouldn't have done that and blah, blah. All of the school witnessed the harmful behavior, and I never saw him again. I hear he moved across the country and was working for a fancy pants school. Story 128. The story of William Sensei, former Japanese teacher and currently incarcerated pedophile. He was my Japanese teacher back in 2006-2007. Word has it he pulled his computer screen up on the projector in front of class, and the whole class got a dose of little boys. I linked the news report above. He was really good at teaching, so it came as a complete shock to everyone that he was after my loins the whole time. Sentenced to 3 years in prison. Story 129. 7th grade Utah geography teacher got fired for saying fudge. I don't think he swore at a student, but the Mormon kids were uncomfortable, tattled, and he got canned. So stupid, he was the only way Utah geography was even mildly entertaining. Story 130. Sleeping with his high school students. Oh wait, that's right. It was rural Tennessee in the late 80s. He didn't get fired. Story 131. He got fired for not permitting police officers to enter his room so that they could search every student's bag for contraband. Story 132. Banging a student. Ironically, not the one it was an open secret he was having an affair with. Everyone who took agri classes or joined FFA heard the rumors about him and this girl. She was a few years ahead of me, so I only knew of her, never talked to her. My senior year, I guess he started seeing this new girl, and I guess her parents saw texts between them. Story 133. More like retired early, but she was batshit crazy and probably tipsy. Didn't really teach, did more singing and dancing. This was not a music or theater class. Story 134. Displaying a male body part pic on the overhead projector to the class. He at the time was seeing another teacher, and they were presumably sexting using their assigned work school iPads. Went to connect his iPad to the overhead projector, and it opened to his male body part. Edit to add that he was not in fact fired, but quietly transferred to a different school in the district. Story 135. Trying to give female students low grades that she felt got too much attention from boys. Asking the football players to come in her room at lunch where she would feed them homemade lunches, sit on their laps, and show them her bras and stuff. So yeah, gross. Story 136. She was also the mayor or deputy mayor of the town, can't remember, but she got arrested for embezzlement in that position, so she obviously lost her job at the school too, LOL. She was a bit of a nut job, and I'm pretty sure she drank on the job. Story 137. Kids kept pulling the fire alarm during finals week as a prank. Alarm goes off again during my biology final. Meanie jerk biology teacher threw a power-tripping hissy fit and told us to stay in our seats and keep working. Biology classroom is in the basement with limited exits. About 15 minutes goes by, and then the dean arrives. She has a nickname that involves a play on monster for a reason. Dean asks him to please step out into the hallway. As soon as the door shuts, she spends the next 5 fully uninterrupted minutes utterly tearing this man a new one loud enough for us to be able to hear. There are no repeats of insults. There are no repeats of his offenses or the codes he has just violated or her explanations of how problematic this shoot was or of any of her thoughts. Just straight 5 minutes of total and complete verbal evisceration. Absolute carnage. It is one of the most magnificent dressings down I have ever heard in my life, both real and from Hollywood. He was not present the next year. Fudge that guy. It should be noted, I dislike that man to this day. When I went to him halfway through the school year to ask if I could move closer to the front, because I was having trouble concentrating in the back row, he said, "That's not my problem. I got a D for the year." He eliminated my love for science, and my entire extended family still comment occasionally about how surprised they were that I did not go into zoology or something like it. Story 138. Okay, I've got 2 stories. My 2nd grade teacher threw my desk across the room because I couldn't find my homework fast enough. This smart aleck kid in the front row couldn't find his, and she started counting down from 10. With every number, she turned a deeper shade of red. At 2, he found it and read out the answer. She scanned the room and saw me. I must have been panicked because somehow she knew it. I couldn't find mine either. I barely squeaked out, "I can't find mine either," and she raged down the aisle, roared that I should get out of the way, picked up my desk and shook everything on the floor and threw it on the ground. Found my math homework, made me sit in my chair in the middle of the mess and read out the answer. My mom had died like 10 months earlier. I was almost nonverbal and a straight A student. I just started at the school a month prior in the middle of the school year. I never told anyone, but my uncle found out because my cousin was in class with me. Not only did she get fired, she got kicked out of her religious order. She was a nun. The 2nd story is just like a lot of others here. Gym teacher caught with high school student in his office. They moved in together after she graduated. Story 139. My teacher was one of those teachers that wore dumb hats in school photos and a ton of other stuff. That same teacher was talking to little girls after school and later got arrested for pedophilia. Story 140. Editing the newsletter for NAMBLA, the National Association for Man-Boy Love. It was not innocent. The articles were about luring children, W candy, etc. Story 141. Middle school principal got fired for hiring an adult worker after our school's basketball game in a neighboring town. Story 142. I've worked in the university setting for 20 years. I've seen a few faculty have to leave before or during their tenure review due to messing around with students. And the university allows faculty to date students as long as they're not in a position of direct authority over them, like their course instructor or advisor, and yet they still can't even follow that rule and wait until class is over or the person switches labs or something. So gross. Y'all watch out for faculty, especially male professors. Story 143. One principal of mine embezzled the money for our new playground. She was escorted off the school grounds. Story 144. Prom night, the Spanish teacher is pulled over by a police officer for swerving on the road. In the back seat is a 15-year-old girl who was a student at the school. He fails the field sobriety test and tries to run. When the police officer chases him down, he tried to fight the police officer. His mugshot with a bruised and beaten up face gets circulated around the school. Story 145. The fact that most of these are PDFs or some type of underage intimacy that was happening is just wild. Story 146. We had a teacher who was selling NFL football pools. 1980s. You'd pay one each and pick a number of teams and turn in the other half with the cash. I forget the number. If you won, you got paid. He was a bookie. He was selling hundreds and hundreds of them every week. As an adult now, how dumb can you be? He was selling them to high school students. Story 147. Showed his balls on cam to a 15-year-old from the other school in my town. Never really understood it. Why just the balls? Either way, what a freak. Story 148. He was accused of having intimacy with a minor. He got fired, got arrested, and got it on his record. The girl turns around and admits she lied about everything. It was a real mess. Story 149. being verbally harmful behavior to me in front of the principal. Best part? My mom also worked at that school. Story 150. Sending private pictures to football players. This was also in like 2005, so the act required way more effort and forethought than it does now. She was also married with children that attended our school. Story 151. Teacher, person A, tried to shoot her wife. Person B, BC, person A, got caught by her wife. Person B trying to seduce a student. Person C, age 16. Story 152. Having intimacy with a freshman. After being fired from her previous job as a dean for having intimacy with a student at another school, she came to our school as a dean and did it again. LOL. Story 153. Threw an eraser at the commander's daughter, then went over and hit her head on the table for not waking up after getting hit with the eraser. Commander had her fired in less than a week. Story 154. In the early 80s, had a biology teacher that was batshit crazy. He finally got fired for flying down the hallway, arms spread and literally buzzing and calling himself a German warcraft. One of the students shot him down with an imaginary machine gun, and teacher threw himself down the stairs. He did lots of crazy shit, but that was what finally got him fired. Story 155. No one ever knew who it was with or exactly what was said or done, but inappropriate contact with a student outside of school was the reason. Story 156. She failed the entire class, including the two best students in the school. I'm not sure why she became a teacher because she disliked kids and was generally a Karen. Story 157. She was a nun, but she was an old school one. Physically reprimanded verbally harmful behavior kids. That's it for this video. Don't forget to support Vancher and my second channel, Vanchus. See you soon.